My wife posted, "A man who pays all the bills isn't a husband, he's a wallet." I just commented, "Then this wallet is closed." Her boss liked my post before she deleted it. When people say the internet never forgets, they don't just mean old photos or college posts. They mean the way a single sentence can light a match that burns down years of carefully built images. That match was struck on a Wednesday morning at 9:13 a.m. when my wife, Mira, opened her phone, scrolled through a feed, and decided to prove to her friends how clever she was. Her exact post read, "A man who pays all the bills isn't a husband, he's a wallet." It wasn't just careless. It was deliberate. She wanted people to see it, to laugh, to nod, to hand her the validation she thought she deserved. And maybe she thought I wouldn't notice because I was already at the office, knee-deep in numbers and meetings. But phones vibrate, friends screenshot, and messages arrive faster than anyone imagines. Within 10 minutes, 3 different colleagues had sent it to me. I remember staring at the screen in disbelief. Not sadness, not rage, just that numb pause when you realize the mask someone wears has slipped and they don't even care to adjust it anymore. I had been paying every bill, every rent increase, every medical copay, every vacation she chose, every night out she bragged about. And this was her gratitude. I didn't reply with anger. I didn't call her. I didn't send a private text. I scrolled right under her post and typed, "Then this wallet is closed." I hit enter. I let it sit. The first like came from a college buddy who always hated her smug attitude. The second came from Myra's own cousin. The third was the one that shifted everything, her direct manager at the marketing firm. That little blue thumbs up carried more weight than anything else on the screen. Within minutes, Myra's comment section turned from a trickle of sympathy to a flood of whispered questions and raised eyebrows. She scrambled, deleted the post, but it was too late. The internet had already stamped it into memory. When she called me later that day, her voice was sharp with forced calmness. She asked why I embarrassed her in front of her friends. She didn't apologize. She didn't backpedal. Her concern wasn't about disrespecting me. It was about losing the audience she craved. I listened in silence, and when she paused, I told her we'd talk when I came home. That silence rattled her more than if I had screamed. At the office, though, I noticed something else. The story had leaked wider than her friend circle. My coworkers weren't whispering behind my back. They were patting me on the shoulder, saying things like, "Good on you, man," and about time someone stood up for themselves. Apparently, Mira had a reputation beyond our home. When I drove home that night, I passed by the cafe where she usually met her friends. The window revealed her sitting alone, staring at her phone. No one had shown up. The people who loved her witty quips online had suddenly gone quiet. Inside the apartment, the air was heavy. Mira started in immediately, telling me she didn't mean it like that it was just a joke. I asked her if it was a joke when she told her sister last month that I was boring because I didn't buy spontaneous luxury gifts. I asked if it was a joke when she said to her coworkers that she deserved more than someone who worked 9 to 5. Her face froze at that. She hadn't realized how many of her whispers had made their way back to me. I didn't fight. I didn't throw things. I walked into the bedroom, pulled out my laptop, and started changing passwords, credit card accounts, bank logins, the joint streaming services. I even canceled the delivery wine subscription she had insisted on keeping. She followed me from room to room, demanding explanations. I said nothing beyond, "The wallet is closed." That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, Myra's boss called her into his office. She assumed it was about a new client pitch. Instead, he asked her why her husband's public comment was going viral among their colleagues. She tried to laugh it off, but he wasn't laughing. He had liked the comment for a reason, because he'd seen her belittle me at company dinners, brushing off my career as safe but small. Now, her mask had cracked publicly, and clients were whispering. When she came home that evening, her fury was volcanic. She accused me of ruining her career. She claimed I had plotted this, that I wanted to humiliate her. I reminded her that I didn't type her post. I didn't mock myself. She did that all on her own. The truth is, Mira had been playing a dangerous game for years. She had built this image of herself as independent, glamorous, above the grind. But every piece of that image had been bought with the very bills she scorned me for paying. My income wasn't flashy, but it was stable, and stability isn't sexy until the ground gives way. Over the following week, things escalated. Friends stopped calling her. Invitations dried up. Even her own brother texted me privately, asking if it was true that I was cutting her off. He admitted she had been leaning on me to cover his failed catering venture too. That was the first time I realized just how many people had been quietly feeding from the same wallet she dismissed. So I started making a list. Every expense, every bailout, every luxury item that had my name behind it. When I showed her the numbers, line by line, her face went pale. It wasn't just dinners or vacations. It was her graduate courses, the down payment on her car, even the rent for her old studio when she claimed she was finding herself. She had built an entire identity on money she now mocked. The breaking point came when her boss invited both of us to a corporate dinner. Normally, Mira thrived in those rooms, basking in attention. But this time, people weren't leaning in to laugh at her stories. They were leaning back, whispering, waiting. One of the senior partners even pulled me aside and said, "You handled it well." Most guys would have lost their head. That sentence carried a weight Mira could feel across the room. She was no longer admired. She was pitted. By the time we drove home that night, she was shaking. Not with sorrow, but with the dawning realization that the ground beneath her was crumbling faster than she could patch. She tried bargaining, promising to delete social accounts, to start fresh. I just looked at her and said, "The wallet is still closed." And in that silence, she understood something she never had before. The life she flaunted wasn't hers. It was mine, and I had just locked the vault. The aftermath of Myra's post spread like oil on water, quiet at first, then rippling into corners we never expected. I thought maybe it would burn out in a few days, replaced by the next bit of gossip. But the opposite happened. Each day, another person unearthed some story or detail that added weight to the image of her arrogance. People weren't just whispering about her post. They were dredging up years of things she had said, jokes she had made, and moments they had brushed off but never forgot. At first, Mira tried to control the damage. She crafted a careful narrative for her closest friends. It was just sarcasm. I had overreacted. We were fine. She even hinted that I had been controlling with money, as if my decision to shut down joint accounts was part of a power game. But the problem with painting yourself as a victim is that someone eventually holds up receipts. And in our case, I had them all. The financial list I had compiled didn't stay in the drawer. A cousin of hers, the same one who liked my comment, asked me point blank one evening if it was true I had paid her brother's failed business lease. I didn't dodge. I told him yes, and not just that. I had covered losses in the tens of thousands. Word spread from there, each conversation multiplying into the next. Soon Mira wasn't the glamorous woman with an edge. She was the woman who mocked the hand that fed her. Her family, who once leaned on me for holiday generosity and quiet financial rescues, started keeping their distance. Her brother called in a fury one night, not because of the money but because his friends had started teasing him that his meal ticket had closed. That phrase hit him harder than it should have, because it wasn't entirely untrue. He accused me of humiliating him. I simply told him I wasn't funding anyone's projects anymore. He hung up, and I knew another bridge had burned. At home, Myra's mood swung like a pendulum. Some days she tried to charm me, cooking dinners she hadn't touched in years, leaving handwritten notes about new beginnings. Other days she stormed through the apartment, shouting that I was sabotaging her. I didn't rise to either extreme. I treated her like someone passing through a hallway, polite, detached, untouchable. That drove her mad more than any fight could have. Meanwhile, her workplace grew colder. She had once been the life of after-hours drinks, the witty one who made cynical jokes about relationships and careers. But colleagues began to see those jokes through a new lens. The boss who had liked my post didn't need to say much. His small gestures told the story. When promotions were discussed, Myra's name never surfaced. When big accounts came in, she wasn't in the room. Her status as team favorite slipped away, replaced by the awkward silence that follows when someone tries too hard to recover their old shine. The avalanche truly began when one of her friends, a woman named Corrine, reached out to me privately. She admitted she had always found Myra's words cutting, but hadn't wanted to cause trouble. Now, with the post as proof, she felt freer to share what she had overheard over the years. She told me about dinners where Mira mocked me openly, saying I was predictable and lacked ambition, that she stayed because stability was useful until something better came along. Hearing it wasn't surprising. I had felt the disdain between us for months, but reading it in black and white on my phone hardened my resolve. I didn't use the information publicly. I didn't need to. People already suspected, and Myra's frantic attempts to repair her reputation only made her look guiltier. She posted carefully staged photos online, solo outings, expensive clothes she had bought with my money long ago, but the comments weren't full of praise anymore. They were curt, sometimes even mocking. Her followers dwindled, and the silence of lost attention weighed heavier on her than any punishment I could design. As for me, I made moves quietly. I rerouted my paycheck into a new account in my name only. I canceled secondary cards she carried. The utilities and rent were still paid. After all, I still lived there, but I let her feel the sudden absence of discretionary money. The coffee shop bills, salon appointments, online shopping carts, those were no longer invisible debits absorbed by me. She noticed within a week when her card declined at a boutique. Her fury afterward was volcanic, but I let it pass over me like smoke. I reminded her once again that the wallet was closed. What I hadn't expected was how fast old allies turned. Her own mother, who had once adored me but tolerated Myra's arrogance, called me one evening in tears. She said she had no idea her daughter treated me that way, that she was ashamed. She begged me to forgive Myra, not for Myra's sake, but for the family's. I told her calmly that forgiveness wasn't the issue. Respect was, and once that is gone, it rarely returns. She didn't argue. She knew I was right. The hardest blow for Myra came at a family gathering 2 weeks later. Her uncle, a blunt man who rarely spoke at length, raised a glass and thanked me for years of support. He didn't mean just emotional support. He meant financial. He listed the times I had stepped in quietly to pay for things others couldn't afford. Everyone at the table turned toward me, then toward Myra, and the silence that followed was brutal. She excused herself halfway through the meal, claiming a headache. I stayed, and for once, people asked about me, not her. By the time I returned home that night, she was waiting, furious, accusing me of orchestrating the humiliation. I didn't deny that the truth had found daylight, but I didn't take credit either. She had planted the seeds herself. I had simply stopped shielding her from the harvest. In the weeks that followed, her life shrank. Invitations ceased, colleagues distanced themselves, and even the family that once leaned on her presence now leaned away. She clung harder to me, alternating between desperate apologies and venomous accusations, but my detachment remained steady. She no longer controlled the narrative, and that loss of control gnawed at her more than anything. Then came the revelation that shifted everything again. A bank statement arrived, one of the few accounts I hadn't yet rerouted, still partly joint. Among the regular transactions was a string of unusual charges. High-end jewelry, electronics, luxury items. None of them were in our home. I traced the vendors, and what I found was clear. Myra had been buying expensive gifts, not for herself, but for someone else. The pieces clicked into place too easily. A coworker she had mentioned more than once, someone brilliant but underpaid, suddenly made sense. The lavish dinners she claimed were work obligations, the late nights at the office, the unexplained purchases, they all aligned into a pattern too sharp to ignore. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I let the knowledge settle, building into a calm certainty. The avalanche wasn't over. It was only gaining momentum, and now, her own secret was about to become the final weight that crushed her carefully constructed image. The bank statements weighed heavier than any insult Myra had ever thrown at me. Numbers don't lie. Purchases don't lie. She had funneled money into a life I hadn't known existed, and the realization didn't spark fury in me. It sparked clarity. I stopped seeing her as my wife and started seeing her as a liability, financial, emotional, social. A liability I had carried for years. Instead of storming into the living room and throwing accusations, I kept my calm. I made copies of the statements, tucked them away, and went about my routine. If there was one thing I had learned over these weeks, it was that timing mattered more than volume. Bursting in with rage would only give her another angle to twist herself into a victim. No, this needed patience. The first crack appeared at her workplace. Her boss, the same one who had liked my reply, started asking questions about her expense reports. Apparently, Myra had been generous in entertaining clients. At least, that's how she filed it. But when he cross-checked receipts, the names didn't match any official meetings. The jewelry purchase in particular raised eyebrows. Who buys diamonds for a client? One evening, Myra came home tight-lipped, her usual energy gone. She poured herself a glass of wine and stared at the wall, saying little. I didn't press. I knew she was unraveling without my help. 2 days later, she cracked. She accused me of spying, of sabotaging her accounts, of turning people against her. She ranted about colleagues whispering, about her boss targeting her. I let her spill it all, and then I simply asked, who was the jewelry for? Her silence was immediate, her eyes darting sideways as if searching for an exit. That was all the answer I needed. I didn't push further. I simply stood up, went to the study, and placed the divorce papers I had already drawn up on the desk. She found them the next morning. The storm that followed was predictable. Tears, shouting, bargaining. She said it was just a friend who needed help. She said she was investing in connections. She even tried to blame me for being too boring, too stable, too predictable. Each excuse was weaker than the last. I listened, nodded once, and told her the lawyer would be in touch. Meanwhile, her world outside kept collapsing. Her boss suspended her pending an investigation. Word spread quickly, and soon her work friends were avoiding her calls. The coworker she had been funneling gifts to vanished from the office gossip too, apparently transferred quietly to another branch. Whether he had cut ties to save himself or been pushed, I didn't care. The effect was the same. She was isolated. The most brutal blow, though, came from her own family. At a gathering, her cousin brought up the gifts, asking if it was true she had been spending our joint money on another man. Mira tried to laugh it off, but no one was laughing anymore. Her uncle, the same blunt man who once toasted me, slammed his hand on the table and told her she had shamed the family. She stormed out, but this time, no one followed. They stayed seated, and one by one, they turned to me with sympathy instead of judgment. I wasn't looking for their approval, but it made the choice clearer. The network she had relied on was gone. The mask she wore had shattered, and the shards cut only her. At home, she grew desperate. She begged for another chance, saying we could start over, that people were against her unfairly. But the woman speaking wasn't the confident, arrogant Mira I had known. She was a shell, scrambling to cling to something solid. For years, I had been that solid ground, but I was done carrying her weight. When I served her with official divorce papers, she tried one last tactic: threats. She said she would take half, that she would ruin me financially if I didn't play fair. That was when I let her see the file I had prepared, a meticulous record of every expense, every bailout, every transfer she had made without consent. I had even included her own post, the one she had deleted, screenshots intact. Her threats evaporated. She realized I hadn't just closed the wallet. I had locked it behind a steel vault with the law on my side. The next weeks were a blur of paperwork, lawyers, and negotiations. Mira tried to push for alimony, but her recent spending habits and the evidence of misused funds made her case laughable. My lawyer was calm, almost surgical, dismantling every demand she made. Each session ended with Mira slumping lower in her chair, her bravado bleeding out bit by bit. The co-worker she had been gifting to, he didn't show up. He didn't testify. He didn't send support. He cut her off entirely, leaving her to face the consequences alone. That silence probably hurt her more than anything I said. She had bet everything on his attention, and when the fire started, he fled. Meanwhile, I focused on restructuring my life. I found a new apartment, modest but mine. I canceled the lingering joint accounts. I sold the furniture she had insisted on but never cared for. Piece by piece, I stripped away the remnants of her influence. Each cut felt like air-filling lungs that had been starved for years. Mira, on the other hand, moved back in with her parents temporarily. The woman who once mocked me for being too ordinary was now sleeping in her childhood room, jobless, under scrutiny, and carrying the stain of public disgrace. Her friends, what few remained, kept their distance. Even the ones who had laughed at her jokes before now used her name as a cautionary tale. The collapse wasn't sudden. It was steady, methodical, and undeniable. Every choice she had made, every cruel word she had thrown, every mask she had worn, it all folded inward. And I didn't have to push. I just had to step back and let gravity do the work. Looking back, I realized something important. Revenge hadn't been my plan. I hadn't plotted her downfall with malice. All I did was stop shielding her from the consequences of her own arrogance. And when the walls she built came crashing down, she discovered they were made of paper, not stone. But I wasn't done yet. There was still the final step, the one that would seal this chapter completely. Not for her. Her collapse was already complete, but for me. I needed the closure of knowing that I could walk away clean, without a single thread binding me to the chaos she created. And that step was coming faster than she realized. The divorce proceedings dragged for weeks, but every meeting tilted further in my favor. Evidence has a way of silencing bravado, and Mira had nothing left but words. My lawyer laid out the transfers, the receipts, the joint accounts drained for luxuries that never touched our home. She tried to argue intent, claiming it was networking or gifts for work, but even the judge raised an eyebrow. The jewelry alone spoke louder than her rehearsed explanations. When the settlement finalized, Mira walked out with far less than she had expected. No alimony, no grand payout, just her clothes, a few personal items, and the weight of her own debts. I watched her sign the papers with a trembling hand, the once arrogant smirk gone. She didn't look at me as she left the office, and I didn't call after her. The door shut quietly, and that was the last time we were husband and wife. But endings don't happen neatly with ink on paper. Consequences ripple outward, touching every corner of a person's life. For Mira, they hit hard. Her job was the first casualty. The investigation her boss had launched uncovered enough discrepancies to terminate her contract. Officially, it was misuse of company funds. Unofficially, it was also her reputation. In our city's small professional circle, word travels faster than resumes. No firm wanted to hire the woman who blurred personal spending with company expenses and dragged scandal into the office. Her attempts to freelance fizzled quickly. Clients Googled her name, saw the story, and backed away. Her finances unraveled next. Without my income, the lifestyle she had paraded online was impossible. She returned the leased car, sold designer handbags for fractions of their cost, and quietly withdrew from the social circles where she once flaunted her glamorous independence. Even her brother, who had once leaned on my wallet, stopped answering her calls when she refused to bail him out with what little remained. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same people she used to belittle me for supporting were now abandoning her when the flow of money stopped. I moved forward steadily. My new apartment became a haven, free from her chaos. I furnished it simply, with pieces I actually liked, not things chosen for appearances. For the first time in years, I woke without tension clawing at my chest. The quiet wasn't loneliness, it was peace. I focused on work, my friendships, even hobbies I had neglected. My life shrank in one way but expanded in another. Mira, however, spiraled. I didn't stalk her online, but word reached me inevitably. She tried to revive her social presence, posting photos that looked increasingly forced, selfies in cafes, captions about new chapters. The comments were sparse, often generic or sarcastic. The validation she once thrived on had dried to a trickle. Then came the cruelest twist of karma. One evening, I received a call from Corrine, the friend who had once confided in me. She told me Mira had shown up at a small gathering, uninvited, and started drinking heavily. At some point, she ranted about how everyone had betrayed her, how I had ruined her life, how the world owed her more. No one argued back. They simply listened, detached, until she left in tears. That was when it hit me. Mira wasn't feared, envied, or admired anymore. She was pitied. And for someone who had built her identity on superiority, pity was poison. Weeks later, she tried reaching out to me. First a text, asking if we could talk. Then a voicemail, slurred, saying she missed the life we had. Finally, an email, more polished, trying to frame everything as misunderstandings, asking if there was any way back. I didn't respond to any of them. Silence was the sharpest reply, and the cleanest. Her last attempt came through her parents. They called me one evening, her mother tearful, asking if I could reconsider, if I could at least meet with Mira for closure. I declined politely. I told them closure had already been signed in ink, stamped by a judge. It wasn't cruelty. It was finality. They didn't press further. I think, deep down, even they understood. By then, I had stopped thinking of her as the woman who betrayed me. She had become a cautionary tale, even to myself. A reminder of what happens when arrogance eats away at gratitude, when masks matter more than substance, when someone forgets that respect is the foundation of everything. The real satisfaction didn't come from watching her fall. It came from knowing I had walked away with my dignity intact. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't schemed in the dark. I hadn't dirted myself with theatrics. I had simply closed the wallet, stepped back, and let her own actions bury her. People sometimes asked me if I regretted the years I spent with her. My answer surprised them. No, I didn't. Those years taught me to see patterns in people. They sharpened my instincts. They showed me how blind generosity can become a leash if it's unreciprocated. I walked into that marriage thinking love was measured by what you could provide. I walked out knowing love is measured by how much respect stays when the providing stops. Months passed. Mira faded from my world entirely. I stopped hearing updates, stopped seeing her name on feeds. If she still tried to rebuild, it was in silence, outside my view. And that was exactly how I wanted it. She had taken enough space in my life already. One morning, as I sipped coffee in my quiet kitchen, I scrolled back to the screenshot of her infamous post. A man who pays all the bills isn't a husband, he's a wallet. Below it, my reply, then this wallet is closed. A simple exchange, only a few words, but it had triggered everything that followed. That sentence had been my turning point, my declaration, my freedom written plainly for all to see. Her boss had liked it. Her family had seen it. Her friends had shared it. And Mira herself had learned the hardest lesson of all. When you mock the very foundation of your life, you shouldn't be surprised when it crumbles. And me? I had no regrets. The wallet was closed, but my life was open again, this time on my terms.